Hey.
Hi, good evening and welcome to Marymount University. I'm Amelia Carden. I'm a sophomore nursing student and Marymount Chamber of Singers president. It's a pleasure being with you all tonight for this special event. We are honored to welcome Dr. Donna Carroll, President of the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities, as our distinguished speaker this evening. Her remarkable career of Catholic higher education, including her long and impactful tenure as President of Dominican University, reflects a dedication to leadership, service, and social justice. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge a special guest with us tonight, Dr. Joseph Vorbach, Superintendent of Schools for Arlington Diocese and alumnus of Marymount's Education Master's Program. Dr. Vorbach, we're always grateful for your continued connection for the Marymount community. Tonight's conversation will be thought-provoking and inspiring as Dr. Carroll shares her insights on leadership, resilience, and the future of Catholic higher education. At this time, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Irma Becerra, the 7th President of Marymount University, Virginia's first only Hispanic serving institution. Under her leadership, Marymount's permanence as a comprehensive doctoral granting university known for its innovative curriculum has continued to grow, with newfound recognition as a designated research university by Carnegie. This dedication to academic excellence and inclusion has earned Marymount recognition from U.S. News and World Report as the best national university, with additional honors for campus diversity and international students. Please join me in welcoming President Becerra.
Thank you, Amelia. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It is my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's special event at Marymount University, where we are continuing our 75th anniversary celebrations. Yay, Marymount! Yay! So, we are 75 years old this year. We're so young. This milestone allows us to reflect on our rich history as Virginia's first Catholic university and engage in thoughtful conversations about the future of Catholic higher education. We are honored to host an extraordinary leader, a personal friend, whose career exemplifies the values that we hold dear: faith, service, and a commitment to student success. Dr. Donna Carroll, President of the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities, brings decades of leadership experience and a deep understanding of the challenges and opportunities facing Catholic institutions today. Before leading ACCU, Dr. Carroll distinguished herself as President of Dominican University in Illinois for nearly 30 years. Just for that, Donna, you're going to heaven. And during her tenure, she transformed the institution into a model of mission-driven education, expanding access, strengthening community partnerships, and tirelessly advocating for undocumented students, a passion that we share. Her work earned her numerous accolades, including the Reverend Theodore Hesberg CSC Award, recognizing her significant contributions to Catholic higher education. In addition to her leadership roles, Dr. Carroll has mentored aspiring college presidents, including me, as a first-year president at the Harvard program, facilitated presidential vocation and mission seminars for the Council of Independent Colleges, and served as an Interfaith America Fellow. Her expertise goes beyond institutional leadership and reflects social justice issues, immigrant reform, and the holistic development of students. This evening, Dr. Carroll will share her insights in a talk titled Faithfully Forward, the Promise and Challenge of Catholic Higher Education. As we look ahead to the future of institutions like Marymount, her reflections will inspire us to think about how we can continue to prepare students for purpose-driven lives while staying true to our Catholic mission. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Donna Carroll.
Ooh, it fell off. Where? Okay, I think we can.
I will take care of it.
You know, let's sit it here.
Yes, good idea.
Okay, how about that? Better? Does that work? Okay, perfect. You know, I chuckled when I hear everybody talk about my years of service. I remember the first time I stood at a podium and I looked out, I was welcoming a group of new freshmen, and I realized that I had been president longer than they had been alive. So, good evening, everyone, and it really is a delight to be part of your anniversary celebration. And it really gave me the opportunity to put together some thoughts about the future of Catholic higher education as it's influenced by the elements that surround us right now, politically, socially, and economically. I approach this task in a hopeful spirit, not naive to what's going on around us, but really confident in the enduring values of what we do. So I've organized my remarks in 4 sections, moving from the concrete to the aspirational. First, I want to give you a sense of the academic community in which we work and study, and also the current concerns and priorities of Catholic university presidents. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the current issues from a Catholic perspective. And finally, I want to talk a bit about the promise of Catholic higher ed today. Having recently met, as Irma knows, with over 400 Catholic institution leaders who generously really shared their wisdom. So let me begin with one of my favorite personal stories about that promise. Did you know that well over 50% of all the Catholic colleges and universities, including Marymount, were founded by congregations of women? In other words, Catholic higher ed is substantially feminist by history and disposition. Last May, when I was in Rome with a small group of college and university presidents, we had the privilege to have a private visit with the Pope. There were 25 of us for 45 minutes with the Pope. When I was introduced as the incoming president of the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities, the Pope winked at me. And then he said, "Women make better leaders than men." But in other words, what we're seeing is an increasingly inclusive and collaborative spirit in the church today. And as higher educators in Catholic universities, we need to own that collaboration and to engage it. Now, it's hard to collaborate without context, so let me tell you a bit about the sector of Catholic higher education to give you a sense of who we are. There are over 200 degree-granting Catholic colleges and universities in the U.S. Almost all of them belong to ACCU. They are sponsored by 46 different religious congregations, 25 of which sponsor more than one institution. 25 of our institutions are less than 1,000 students. 35 of our institutions are over 5,000 students, and everybody else is in the middle. We educate close to 750,000 students annually. And I always say this last one in pieces. Collectively, we have $51 billion in endowment. Our average endowment is $290 million. And the median endowment, most of our institutions, is about $50 million. So you can see the range of institutions. You know, the value proposition of Catholic higher ed is really very strong. We have the highest graduation rate of any single sector, higher than all the public universities, higher than all the private universities collectively. According to the Georgetown Center of Education and Workforce, our graduates have among the highest earnings, 15, 30, and 40 years out. We're a little slow to start because we are substantially liberal arts institutions, but over time we have, by year 15, the highest collective earnings. And there was a recent study done by St. Mary's in Texas that demonstrated that our alums across Catholic higher ed express a higher sense of personal fulfillment and moral agency after graduation than any other sector. So we really do have enormously high outcomes. We're not without constraints, however, and I often say that our mission is our greatest strength and a vulnerability. Catholic colleges and universities educate the largest number of Pell-eligible students of any sector, almost 40%, and we have the highest graduation rate of Pell-eligible students nationally. In other words, access is our DNA, which often equates with tight budgets, and it also equates by necessity with mission-driven innovation, with stressful periods of change, and exhausting workloads. So be kind to faculty and staff at Catholic universities. I've talked individually with over 100 Catholic institution presidents in the recent months, seeking their guidance about the future direction for ACCU and Catholic higher ed. Here are 5 of the priorities that they repeatedly said in my words. Number 1, the most important thing for presidents today is identifying strategies and models for reshaping Catholic higher education to ensure a robust future. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. We've seen some of our smaller Catholic institutions close or merge, so we have to think differently and more aggressively about our shape in the future. We also have to focus on a closer alignment of leadership and governance in order to create greater capacity to change. We have senior leadership, we have boards of trustees, and we have sponsoring communities that need to be working together so that there's a readiness for change. We need to strengthen our understanding of and our support for the role of the humanities and theology, even as we face on-time market demands. It has to be a both end. We have to support new models of sponsorship that preserve and strengthen Catholic identity in all of our institutions. And presidents are concerned that we actively represent their interest and influence in Washington, in Rome, and in the press. Of course, in our current climate, the latter challenge is more complex than ever, and I am going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. But when I talk about Catholic higher education, I like to start with an understanding that the academy is not the church. Okay, we are an educational ministry of the church, ex corde ecclesia, from the heart of the church, but our purpose is different, distinct though interdependent. Whereas the church, through its bishops, has authority for matters of faith, advancing the sacred tradition, the Catholic University, through its research and teaching, advances an intellectual tradition in the context of faith. Ours is a learning tradition, essentially, faith in dialogue with contemporary issues. And on occasion, we find ourselves in creative tension with church teaching, which is okay. In fact, it's healthy every once in a while. I like to quote the great Notre Dame president, Ted Hesburgh, the award. And Ted once said, "A Catholic university should be a crossroads where all the intellectual and moral currents of our times meet and are thoughtfully considered." So how does all this help us understand and act in our current circumstance? You know, without question, the blitz of executive orders, the Dear Colleague letter, and the challenging rhetoric coming out of Washington, our hometown, has rattled the conscience of Catholic higher education, no matter one's political leanings. The veracity of many of our programs and services is being questioned, And our most vulnerable students, families, colleagues, and colleges are confused and increasingly fearful. Right now, however, it is important to take a deep breath and recognize that, and a colleague of mine gave me this term, the flood the zone strategy at play is just that, and we need to lean deeply into our mission and identity. As Catholic colleges and universities, we uphold the principles of Catholic social teaching. We believe in the dignity of each person in our care, regardless of status. We give preferential option to the poor and marginalized, which is why many of us are poor. And we are committed to the common good, to the creation of a more just, humane, and sustainable world. These values are not transient. They're not trendy. They've been around as long as we've been around. Rather, they're really fundamental to who we are as Catholics. They're fundamental to how we teach, the services we offer, and the moral agency with which our institutions and our graduates engage the world. So we need to stay the course. Our Catholic intellectual tradition is an advantage here. As a wise Jesuit once wrote, we are meaning makers. Whatever the context, we look to and answer the significant questions of life with a holistic, historical, and ethical perspective. For us, faith and reason illuminate each other equally, and we are challenged to see contradictions as invitations for deeper study and continuing dialogue. Right now, our country is faced with uncertainty and polarizing dissent. Our Catholic practice is to remain well-informed and to bring the best of our interdisciplinary thinking to these challenging moments, keeping our focus on our primary task, which is mission-centered teaching and learning. I was talking to a group of Catholic institution senior diversity officers a few weeks ago, and I will tell you what I told them about our current circumstance. We have a choice. We can be angry, and probably deservedly so at some level, or we can take control of our narrative and anchor our work more deeply in the mission that inspires it, a mission that in the current circumstance provides us with space and opportunity. Having said that, I do not want to underestimate the current concerns about student access, academic freedom, external funding, or our collective sense of well-being. What I do want to do is assure you that the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities is working with its sister associations on influencing policy, and that faith-based institutions are all together exploring strategies to safeguard our religious liberties. As it's happening, as I say to colleagues and friends, it's important not to lose heart. In particular, I've been advising 5 core activities. Number 1, for my colleagues at universities, focus on students and the radical hospitality that is so defining of Catholic higher ed. Find your particular anchor in Catholic social teaching. Ask yourself, when the going gets tough, what keeps you going? You know, what is the meaning and purpose that anchors all you do? Put aside campus differences and work together. You know, under a lot of stress, we see tensions. Those are small tensions we need to put aside and focus on our core work. Choose your battles and your podiums and see the leadership opportunities that mission provides in this current circumstance. All right. Speaking of podiums, let me say a few words about the concept of neutrality before I speak about promise. And here I have to admit a personal bias. As Irma mentioned, I was the president of a strongly social justice-driven Catholic university with a prominent immigration reform agenda for 27 years. So my risk threshold for public, sometimes political comment is pretty high. That's not the case for every Catholic institution or leader for different reasons, especially today. However, it is my hope on occasion that Catholic higher educators will speak courageously in the face of injustice and that trustees will support their voice. And when I say that, I like to quote Pope Francis, who we are all praying for desperately right now. The Pope said not too long ago, "We cannot let fear manage our universities. Neutrality is a mirage. A Catholic university must make choices that reflect the gospel. It must take a stand and clearly show that stand in its actions for the transformation of the world in the service of the human person and investing in fraternity." So now let me talk briefly about the future. As I suspect or hope you know, Marymount's 75th anniversary coincides with the Jubilee of the Catholic Church, and the Jubilee theme is Pilgrims of Hope. A colleague of mine wrote in one of her recent books, "Hope is the virtue that amplifies all other virtues." Of course, one of my favorite board chairs often said to me, "Donna, you can't take hope to the bank." Both of those statements are true as we look ahead. This past November, ACCU convened a summit of 20 of our most innovative presidents, including your president, to think collaboratively about the future of Catholic higher education. As I said to that group, survival of the fittest is not the strategy for advancing the common good of Catholic higher education. So what do we do? How do regional institutions work more collaboratively together? How do larger, well-resourced Catholics help smaller, struggling places? Not out of charity, but to ensure that Catholic higher education remains accessible. The goal is ultimately to leverage the advantages of shared identity and tradition and to be ready to change strategically and financially. I'm often asked, especially by faculty and students, what can I do? First and foremost, my answer is, don't take the Catholic identity of Marymount University for granted. Whether this is your religious tradition or not, whether you chose Marymount for its mission or convenience, it's a lovely building, right? Very convenient. Whether you're a trustee, a humanities faculty member, the chief diversity officer, or a student leader, take time to understand your role and your experience in the context of mission. And don't let the pressures of the moment distract you or erode the culture of welcome that is so distinctively Catholic. In times like this, I'm a strong advocate for telling founding stories, the stories of the founding members of a congregation, because they remind us that Catholic higher ed has faced challenges before and will emerge from this uncertainty today even stronger. So let me close by telling you one of my stories. It's both playful and a little irreverent, and I hope not too many of you have heard me tell it before, but I find it a fun way to end these talks, particularly at institutions like Marymount or Dominican, for that matter. Once upon a time, a very devout woman led a long life, went to heaven, and she was met by Peter at the pearly gates. And he said, "Welcome, and how can we acknowledge and reward you for all your good work?" And she thought about it, and she said, "Well, you know, I would really love a private conversation with the Blessed Mother." And he said, "Well, we can arrange that." And so he brought her into a room and introduced her to Mary, and she and Mary had a wonderful conversation. And at the end of the conversation, the woman said to the Blessed Mother, "Could I ask you one more question?" And the Blessed Mother said, of course. If you were to do it all over again, would you do anything differently? And Mary looked around. She went and pulled down the blind and came back and said, I would have had a girl. So it's one of the few stories a female president can tell about him. But those are just a few of my thoughts about Catholic higher ed. I'm happy to answer any questions and talk informally with you from there.
Opportunities as well as challenges that Catholic higher education institutions face today.
Mm-hmm.
How can schools like Marymount best position themselves for future success? I know you spoke about collaboration, and that's a very important thing.
Mm-hmm.
I love what you said to us when we met in Chicago, that survival of the fittest is not a strategy. So how can schools like Marymount best position ourselves for success?
Well, I always say you lean into your strengths and you lean into your history. And I would say this about Dominican too. When you're a smaller Catholic institution, you're able to build relationships with students and faculty and encourage those relationships in ways, hey Barbara, in ways that you can in a larger place. And I think it's important to take advantage of that and to highlight that. I also think that small institutions pivot well. And sometimes change is hard, but in a small institution, you're able to adapt quickly to new opportunities. You're able to respond quickly to changes in climate, and that gives institutions like Marymount and Dominican an advantage. And I guess the other thing I would say is what we all say, and I know Irma and I believe it deeply. Don't shy away from your identity. I mean, I like to feel that institutions should be proud to be Catholic institutions. They should understand the mission deeply and how it distinguishes everything we do. And be able to assure that it permeates not only the core curriculum and the co-curriculum, but how we shape and challenge graduates.
And I actually think, as I reflect on Marymount, our core values, that it's our mission from the Religious of the Sacred Heart of Mary of intellectual curiosity, service to others, and having a global perspective. We live these core values every day. So it's not something that is in a some corporate book shelf somewhere. So I think that is certainly a way that we reflect on leaning into our Catholic identity and core values. You touched a little bit on this in your talk about Catholic universities. They need to strive a balance between faith-based mission with the need to innovate scientific discovery and adapt and an always evolving educational landscape. How can we remain true to our core values while remaining competitive and relevant to students?
Well, I think that that piggybacks on the conversation we just had. That I mean, once upon a time, when we were more able to provide a full-time residential liberal arts education, it was more transparent, and the integration that we require in the context of Catholic social teaching was built into that liberal arts education. Now we have to, in many cases, use the core curriculum to do that and assure that we are preparing and equipping our faculty and staff in those professional programs to be doing the same thing. Because it's a both-and situation right now, but particularly with the stresses and constraints financially. that you can't be all things to all people. But I will say, and it's a struggle at most institutions, that the Catholic intellectual tradition and Catholic social teaching it requires a broad liberal education. So all of our institutions, in one way or another, have to fight to maintain that and to assure that core education is strong and relevant and provides the critical thinking, the integrated learning, the sense of beauty, the sense of joy that are components of our Catholic faith, and trying to do that and at the same time provide a education that's relevant for students is an ongoing challenge. But we can't be afraid of those challenges. We have to lean into them too, and believe that the depth and the quality of our faith and our education will survive and thrive in that new environment.
That's very, very illuminating. Was wondering a little bit about when it comes to immigration reform and undocumented students. How can Catholic institutions support these students, especially at times where we're getting a little bit of conflicting messages and rapidly shifting policies?
Let me start with my story, my crucible story about working in immigration, which I often tell, which happened many years ago now. I didn't know much about immigration reform. One day I was driving to work in a snowstorm in Chicago, and in Chicago we have feet of snow, and I saw one of our students on a bicycle pedaling to campus. And we had about 1.5 feet of snow. So I pulled over, and as you can often do as a president in a small institution, I said, "David, put your bike in my trunk and let me drive you to campus." And while we were driving to campus, I said, "And why in the world are you on a bike in a snowstorm?" And he explained to me that he was undocumented. And at that time in Illinois, undocumented students could not get a driver's license. That story broke my heart, and it changed the entire trajectory of my presidency, and probably changed the shape of Dominican University, which today has a large number of undocumented students. I tell that story because I believe that the most compelling way to address immigration reform is to know the people and the families involved. If you work closely with first-gen students, many of them undocumented, or many of them in families that have undocumented members in their family. If you've known them, if you've seen their industry, if you've seen how deeply they cherish the educational opportunity they have, and understand how it will impact and change the lives of their family, it's hard not to be advocates for them, to accompany them in the process. Right now, shame on us, excuse me for being political, but right now I think the best thing we do is to be supportive, to try to create space where students feel that they have as much safety as they can feel, so that they're, one of the dynamics right now that we're seeing in this particular space is that students are frightened to come to campus, not because they think campus isn't safe, but because they're frightened to be separated from their family in the event the family might be deported and they want to be together. And so I think there are constraints to what we can do. We have to understand their experience, however, and make whatever accommodations we can. And we have to lean into and speak into our Catholic values, which respect the dignity of every person, regardless of their status. And that hasn't changed, and do everything we can to be supportive and helpful.
So are you guys getting ready with questions? I have one more, and then I'd like to open the floor. But as Marymount looks ahead to its next 75 years, what advice would you offer all of us here, faculty, university leaders, students, as we navigate the complex landscape of higher education?
Oh, goodness. To have faith and confidence in your institution, to recognize that we can make changes and still retain a strong sense of mission and values, and to look for those opportunities. I like to tell stories of alums, to go back into your alums, because you get so many wonderful stories of accomplished women in the history here, and that can give you confidence in the next generation of accomplished women. But.
And speaking of alums, we have Lita Tracy, who is our alum that will receive the Halo Award now in our event in March, and who's also been on our board for many, many years. So Lita and Ed joining us tonight. So who would like to ask Dr. Donna Carroll a question? And you can come to you with a microphone.
Or you can just, yeah.
No, I don't have a question. I can do microphones.
Well, I will tell you why you're waiting. I did attend a women's college myself, and it was a very formative part of who I am, and so I believe deeply in the experience of women's colleges. So, historically, women's colleges even grew. Yes.
Yes, Donna, thank you so much. That was so inspiring and beautiful education. And we touched so many important components for us that we call it the vision and the dream, the hope. And when you talk about the sense of community with our university, I feel that's an area that probably there is room for us to observe and explore. So what is your experience in unifying the academic Catholic institutions for them to work more together, to create a sense of community themselves?
Right, let me make sure are you asking community building within Marymount or across institutions?
Across institutions.
Okay. You know, I think there are already strong relationships across institutions, and my evidence for that is we just had our annual meeting, and we had the highest number of presidents that attend any annual meeting of any association, because there is this sense of camaraderie and relationship. What I'm trying to do now in the context of we're looking at a blueprint for the future of Catholic higher education, and in order to assure the future of not only the future of an individual institution, but the future access to Catholic higher ed, we have to collaborate more. And so now we have to take those relationships and use them as the foundation to find ways to share programs, share services, share fractional faculty, do joint ventures in ways that we haven't done before. I think we have the opportunity to do that. I think we have a greater opportunity than most sectors because we have a shared mission and because we do have a commitment to the common good. And I see more of a willingness to do that now across Catholic institutions than I've seen in the past. I will tell you, though, just in a humorous, loving ways, I was going to say something. I would say the institutions founded by women and the institutions founded by men are the hardest to marry, because the women do not appropriately, so do not want to lose control. Fear that they will lose control in some cases, congregation-wise, and there's history for that. Yeah.
Here,
Thank you again for being here, and appreciate all your remarks. I wanted to ask, what should, since I've kind of come at it from the K through 12 Catholic education perspective, what can and should or might we be doing more of to collaborate in the service of Catholic higher education?
Right. You know, I think we're all pipeline for one another, and I think the extent to which we can build seamless transitions from high school to college would probably benefit both. Would benefit both. That I think there are opportunities in to offer seniors advanced standing at universities that lets them accelerate into programs and makes the high school program that much more enriching, but also allows that bridge to college in a more direct and thoughtful way.
Yeah, if I may, Donna, like I can anecdotally, like both of my kids went to Catholic parochial and then high school, and both of my kids have a degree, either the first degree out of college, out of high school, or a second degree from a Catholic university. But most of their friends went to public universities. So very, very few of my kids, their friends who went to Catholic school their whole life, very few of them went to Catholic university. So I think we need more of explaining to parents the value proposition. I think a lot of times parents are just looking at a little bit of commoditized in terms of the less expensive solution, and you end up comparing it's apples and oranges, because it's not the same to go to a school where you're one of 500 in a classroom versus one where you're getting the personal attention of your professor and really in the formative years of a young adult to have an ethics, values-based education. You don't get that at a large public university. It's not possible. But we've become a little bit kind of commoditized what higher ed is. I don't know if I hope that's not insulting, but if there are parents comparing Marymount with Mason, it's no comparison. I mean, there you're not about the dignity of the individual, the development of the whole person. So, but I don't know that parents know how to make that different calculus, and students certainly don't, because they're looking at football, a big deal, and unfortunately for 6 football games a year, you lose that battle. So I don't know, I think that this is a very important topic, and I would welcome more of a collaboration not only with the high schools, but also with parishes about communicating that value.
Yeah, and I think, and there's a lot of this going on now, but I think that our schools of education are feeders for your classroom, that the extent to which we can strengthen those relationships too are very important.
So we talked a little bit about the importance of a liberal arts core or a broad core, and so how are you see? Have the President's given you any good ideas on how do we find ways to enlarge the core with our expanding world? Right? There's so many other things that our students need to know now. Is there people that have been successful in adding larger, different areas to a core and kind of increasing the commonality of the experience as opposed to focusing on the majors? Or what have you seen any positive or ways that you could kind of make that core stronger?
You know, I think there are a lot of strong core curriculums out there. I mean, and I think, you know, I think a number of them are deliberately vertical. And I think that's one of the issues that development, you know, that with the market-driven pressures and with students wanting career skills, obviously you have to have both. So too often we find students scrambling to run through their gen eds so they can get to, or we have disciplines that are very tightly packaged and it's hard to. So I've seen some very effective cores that are seminared up through the 4 years, so that they can assure that that integrated developmental experience is up through 4 years. I think it is really one of the most important things that a faculty can create together. And I think as you're seeing, as you know, you're asking, you know, everything from AI to, you know, as we see so much information coming into our space, it really, we can't just patch together disciplines. We have to have faculty doing their best thinking together across disciplines to assure that those core courses are multifunctional in ways that they might not have had to have been before. We're doing, I will tell you this because it's true, we had the Academy of Arts and Sciences, the head of the program in the humanities, come speak at our annual meeting. And I should see if I can straighten. And one of the alarming things we're seeing is majors in the humanities are decreasing more dramatically in Catholic institutions than other institutions. Now that may have to do with our demographics, it may have to do with a number of things, but I think we have to do more to help our students, particularly because we have so many first generation to college students and families, to understand the long-term career value of the liberal arts. You know, you can get that through the core curriculum, but you know, you can get that even more deeply in your majors too. I mean, I majored in English and I got a job. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, as an alum of a large Jesuit university, and thinking of, sorry, I'll read my background is a nurse practitioner, but as an alum of a large Jesuit university and seeing the cross-pollination, my question is, how do we build cross-pollination across the larger Catholic universities, coupling in the network of our small universities? And I say that in the preface that many of the larger Catholic universities tend to have alums in some of these key anchor leadership positions, in finance, with this, with that. Yet, how we, as a small university, can kind of cross-pollinate. I'm thinking opportunities for alum consortium networks or things like that that gives graduates from a small university like Marymount access to others. Is there any thinking like career centers, cross-pollination, anything like that?
Okay. Actually, it's an interesting thought. Have I seen much of that? No. What I am seeing and what I am encouraging is that we're starting to talk about consortiums or systems of Catholic institutions. So in urban areas. So we have 10 Catholic universities in Philadelphia. We have we have 7 Catholic universities in Buffalo. We have 6 in San Antonio and the like. And we're trying to encourage those institutions for practical reasons, but also for enriching reasons, to see them not to be merging per se, but to see themselves as systems in the same way that you have state systems. That would allow for some shared resources, some shared, it could be career services and the like.
If I could just follow to be more specific, I mean, here in this market, there was such a consortium between, Georgetown, Catholic, the different universities. I don't know the status today where that still exists, or that is being resurrected. That used to be back in the early 80s, 90s.
Okay. For cross-registration,
Yeah,
courses, faculty.
I don't know if that
Yeah,
exists today.
it does.
Yeah,
I can answer, I can answer your
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the consortium still exists, and we do have a course sharing that is not working well. So I'm the incoming chair of the consortium, and Pam is helping me fix that, right, Pam? Yeah, we're working on that. I think course sharing will be important. I think it gives us also the opportunity to introduce our students to another potential graduate school in the vicinity. You keep the talent here, but we haven't really maximized the opportunity, so I will be working on that.
Right. And there, since those consortiums originally started, we've done a lot with online learning too. So that has sort of changed the dynamic because there's so many opportunities there. Yes.
Well, and thank you so much for being with us tonight. I say a prayer every day to God to expand my boundaries and territories, and tonight has done that.
Thank
So
you.
I thank you. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Mary Carson, but her name was Mary Smith. And I went to Catholic school in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I learned about diversity. I wasn't Spanish, and all the students were. And I didn't speak Spanish. And at lunchtime, or I was in a candy, outside of recess, they wouldn't play with me or they teased me. So I went into church and I lit all the candles and prayed for all those people who wouldn't let me play. And the priest came in and tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "What's your allowance?" And I said, "Quarter a week." And he said, "Bring it in to me every Monday. And now to pay for these candles." And I said, "But Father, I was praying for those kids out there." But anyway, it taught me a very good lesson, and it brought it back on diversity. And we all have to have that training, especially today, because there's so much negativity to it. But mine came at a very early age, and I realized that we all want the same, and I had to get along. But I also wanted just to say that this has been very interesting. And I think that we can use our alumni to come in and talk to the students. When I was recruited to come to Marymount, it was in 1990, and I'm 85, so I was not a young student. But my boss was Ken Cuccinelli, who was the Attorney General. And he sent me here and paid my way and got my MBA. When I came out, I was made national spokesperson for the natural gas industry. And they sent me to 47 states in 5 different countries. So there's a lot to say there, and I'm just one alumni. So I think that we could very much bring in some of our alumni who have accomplished things to share that with the students or the students at the other schools. My daughter-in-law teaches at one of the Catholic schools. She's a principal, an assistant principal. No one comes in and tries to talk about Marymount or any other Catholic school, why not?
Mhm.
These are kids going to Catholic grade school or junior high, and there's nobody there recruiting. So I think that if we could get these type of things across and have the alumni come back and work with faculty and staff, it might be helpful to you.
So Mary, you're gonna speak to Evan, you're not gonna let him leave, and you're gonna introduce him to your daughter-in-law, because one of us someone is gonna go to that school. I
You know, I have
promise,
get in touch with me. But thank you.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you, yeah. Let me say something about diversity, because it is such a complicated issue right now in how it's being perceived. You know, as Catholic institutions, you know, I had a good friend and colleague that when he would talk about this, he would say, you know, don't people understand? Our first diversity officer was Jesus. We've been doing this work for a long time. And I think that if people understand that, you know, that the work we do on Catholic campuses, even when we're working with a particular group of students, is not an exclusive exercise. That if you go into most Catholic institutions, most, if not all, of the programs we offer are open to all students. They've always been open to all students. And so when you hear the current rhetoric around challenging and closing programs because they are exclusive or, you know, only for that, those are rare occurrences in Catholic institutions. All of our programs are open to all of our students. And so yes, in this current climate, most of our Catholic institutions are looking at our programs, and it gives us the opportunity to assess and say, are there things that we should be doing differently? But I can say with confidence, I don't think there's much that we will be doing differently, because in the context of our mission, we are offering programs and services that support our students.
Is there, I know that we have a reception coming up, so I wanted to, unless there is a burning question, I know Donna, you'll be around a little bit,
Sure.
but can you please help me give a round of applause?